set up here. Okay, my name is Andrea. I'm the Children's Ministry Coordinator here at the church. I have been sick for the last week and barely have a voice. So excuse the sound of my voice as I read today's story. Now, if you were here last week we began in the story of Joseph. However, we had an epic puppet show planned to introduce the story and to tell you throughout the whole month. And because I had no voice on Sunday, it got postponed. So today we have to kind of condense last week and this week all into one setting. So it's slightly longer than normal, but the girls behind here, Abby and Marissa, have put an epic amount, and Ari, well, Abby and Marissa made the puppets, so sorry, Aria. Abby and Marissa put an epic amount of work into some awesome puppets. So kids, make sure that you can see the puppets from wherever you're sitting. If you need to move so you can't see past, you won't be able to see through me, and you're gonna wanna see these puppets. So feel free to come up close if you wanna come watch closer. Okay, our story begins in the land of Canaan, a land filled with God's promises and also filled with one very dramatic family. I'm talking reality TV kind of drama. Would you like to meet the family? Okay, so we first have Jacob the dad. Hi, Jacob. Okay, you can go away now. Jacob had 12 sons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, God. 8. I should have seen that coming. 9, 10, 11, 12. He also had a sister. That was the 13th. Now, unlike God, who does not have favorites, the dad in this family did have a favorite. Everybody groaned. Yeah, terrible. His favorite child was Joseph. Oh, Joseph was not a special sometimes favorite. Oh no, he was a full-on rainbow coat wearing, obvious to everyone favorite. Joseph, strut your stuff. Okay, look at him, this 17-year-old strutting his stuff like he owns the place. Well, according to his dad, he sort of did. Well, what do you think his brothers thought about this? They were not impressed. Look at all those 12 brothers, 4 times 3. They were not just a little annoyed, they were hurt, angry, exhausted by the constant reminders that they were second best. The Joseph Show was on 24/7, and they hated every episode. Okay, you can go away. I wonder if all of that ego and confidence started to get to Joseph's head, because soon he started to have wild dreams. There he was sleeping in bed, and he started to dream of great grandeur. One day he would be even more important than he is today. The dreams were so exciting, in fact, that he leapt out of bed and he had to tell his brothers. So he ran to the field where his brothers were working. He gathered them all together and he said, guess what? I had the best dream ever. I dreamt that all of your wheat, oh, look at that nice wheat. All of your wheat bowed down to my wheat. Wow, it was so amazing. One brother's jaw dropped to the floor. Another face scrunched up with anger, and another brother began to shake with rage. And then, like an explosion, they all shouted at once, "Who do you think you are?" Well, that was only just the start of the story. Okay, go away. Because on another day, the brothers were out in the field again. Oh, there they are. 4 times 3, 12. All of them were out working as hard as can be. Joseph wasn't there working, but he was sent as the little brother to go check on all of them. So he came strolling along, happy as can be, wearing his rainbow coat, whistling a happy tune, and his nose up in the air. Well, his whistling must have been off tune, or simply the sight of him annoyed the brothers so much that the brothers snapped. They grabbed him, and they almost killed him, but they didn't. Instead, they threw him into a pit. Slow motion falling into a pit. And they thought about just leaving him there to die, but then they realized, oh, they could make some money off of him, so they sold him to a caravan of camels. And the caravan from Midian took Joseph away. Well, then the brothers cooked up another plan. It was one of those cover-up kind of plans. And they grabbed Joseph's coat. They slaughtered a goat. We did not capture that. They smeared the blood all over Joseph's coat, and they brought the coat to Jacob. Well, Jacob saw the coat, and he was convinced that Joseph had been eaten by wild beasts, and he mourned like there was no tomorrow. End scene. Oh, we can get rid of the rainbow coat, too. Okay, so that was the end of scene 1. But what happens to Joseph next? Thanks for the applause. Well, Joseph traveled in the caravan with the camels, and he was headed to Egypt. And it was a long journey, so I imagine he had a lot of time to think. How could my brothers do this to me? They were supposed to bow down and worship me. Where am I going? What is going to happen to me? My God, have you forsaken me? Well, I wonder if Joseph also thought about his own behavior. Did he wonder if his own pride and boasting might have pushed his brothers to the breaking point? Well, after quite some time, the caravan finally reached Egypt, and Joseph was sold again. This time, he was sold to the high-up Egyptian official named Potiphar. Potiphar was the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And Joseph, you can bow to your new master. There we go. Okay, well, Joseph had lost his favorite coat. He'd lost being treated as his father's favorite son, but he had not lost God's presence. God was with Joseph, and God's presence was seen in everything that Joseph did. Every job that Joseph did turned out perfectly well. Even sweeping was amazingly clean. Joseph worked so hard for Potiphar that Potiphar noticed all the hard work he had done, and he put Joseph in charge of his entire household. When Joseph started to be in charge of the farm, even the grain grew more grain than had ever grown before. It was amazing. God's presence with Joseph was so evident. And perhaps Joseph's heart had started to change a little bit too, because the Bible doesn't record him bragging about any of his successes, not even a single time. He simply worked hard and remained faithful to his duties. Well, a happy ending would be nice, but let's be honest, nothing boosts reality TV ratings like a fresh dose of drama. And Joseph's story is even more dramatic than reality TV. Not everything was peaceful in Potiphar's house. Go away, Joseph. Okay. Because somebody else lived in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife. This is where we do ooh, ah. Okay. So Potiphar's wife had noticed Joseph. But she didn't notice his skills in the chore department. She thought he was kind of cute. Day after day, Potiphar's wife winked at Joseph. She twirled around to get his attention, and she begged for him to come and cuddle up with her. But Joseph refused. He turned his back to her and said, "No way, my master trusts me. I won't betray him and sin against God." Well, one day, Joseph came to work, and no one else was home except for Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife grabbed Joseph by the coat. Oh, that poor guy in coats, honestly. And she said, "Stay with me." But Joseph did what was right. He ran away and left his coat behind. She was left holding his coat or staring at it on the floor and holding a grudge. When Potiphar came home, she pointed at the coat and shouted, "That Hebrew slave tried to attack me." Potiphar was furious, and without even checking the facts, he threw Joseph into prison. Oh, here comes the sad music. Poor Joseph in jail. Can you imagine what Joseph was thinking now? Maybe he was thinking, I've been faithful. I didn't brag. I worked hard. I didn't do anything wrong now. And here I am in prison. What am I going to do? What will happen to me? God, where are you? But even in jail, God was with Joseph. Do you remember what the Psalms say? Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? There is no pit, no prison, no faraway land where God is not already there. And the Lord was with him. Now we'll have to wait till next week to find out what happens next.
Well, anyway, it's really nice to be back with you. There are more of us than the last time I was here, which is great. It just changes things a little bit, but it's all good. After that puppet show, I'm thinking, why am I preaching? Because that was terrific, just really fun. And part of how I wanted to start out today was just to read the story from Genesis 39, because it's just good to hear it. And one of the things that I really am hoping for is that, apart from the story itself, is just to get a sense of how wonderful it is to deal with stories in Scripture. Because before you ever think about the Bible as a database for doctrine, which happens way too much, it is first and foremost a story. And what's different about that is that when you're just lifting verses and sentences and stuff to find out, what truths you can build a system of theology and so on about, a story is different because stories are things that we enter. You enter into a story, and in the Bible's case, we actually become participants in the story. It's a whole different thing. A story is this way. The story of our lives, each of us, is actually framed and anchored and receives meaningful purpose from the big story that surrounds us. We actually live our stories within a much bigger one. And that's part of what hopefully will come through today as we talk. I love studying the Bible stories, reading them. And you'll figure out why in a minute. So this one, there are layers and layers and layers. And last week, I'm guessing, you finished off with Joseph being sold. Right? That's where you finished off? And so let's pick up the story, and I'll just read it. The puppets will help you hear again the story. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Just imagine. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. Like, I think we got the point now, right? It keeps repeating it. With Joseph in charge, he didn't concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Okay, now Joseph was well-built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master doesn't concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. She told him this story: "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help," I am the hero, "he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And so the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. That's Genesis chapter 39. And that's the story you actually heard, didn't you? It rings true with what you saw, which is great. So here's the thing. Last week, the story of Joseph, I think Pastor Dale made some connections. He was saying the story of Joseph reminds us of the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. Remember that? And then he said it also reminds us a little bit of Jesus in some different ways. So I'm going to pick up on that. So when Joseph was sold to that band of people, that caravan going to Egypt, Joseph was betrayed, he was despised and rejected, and for 20 shekels he was sold. Interesting piece. When they sold him, they had his coat, but they were missing his body. Right? The body was missing. So what they have to make up a story about why the body is missing. Well, it was eaten up by wild animals, and so you get the blood and so on and so on. Now, does that sound familiar to you? I hope it does. Because there's another story the Bible tells about somebody despised, rejected, betrayed, sold, in this case for 30 shekels, a little inflation over the years, right? And what happens after the resurrection? The body is missing, the tomb is empty, and so they have to concoct a story to say he's actually dead. The body was stolen. Joseph was still alive. Later on, the son of Joseph was still alive, but they had to concoct a story. And we're going to run into that same thing one more time a little later. Okay, back to Joseph. So you imagine being Joseph, and like we heard in the puppet show, what's going through Joseph's mind and heart? When he's with this caravan, he's a captive, he's on his way to Egypt. He's never been to Egypt before, right? And you wonder what's going on in his mind. Are there regrets that he has for sharing his dreams and wearing his coat and so on? Or was he pouting? Poor me. This isn't fair. All of that kind of stuff. Was he planning revenge? If I ever get out of here, my brothers are going to pay. And as you know from other places, revenge is a dish best served cold down the road sometime. But the whole question of attitude, right? What's he thinking? Is he thinking about God at all? Where is God? Why have you forsaken me? All those questions. Why am I on my way to Egypt? This is ridiculous. I wonder about anxiety and fear and all kinds of things about the unknown. So that's the first part of the journey, right? He gets to Egypt, he gets sold to this Potiphar person, this fairly high up person in Pharaoh's guard. And yeah, so far, so good, right? Because as the story unfolds, when he's there in Potiphar's house, everything seems to be turning to roses and gold. Everything's turning out perfect, right? And you almost hear that story and you feel like it's almost way beyond the pale how good everything is going. It's almost as if it's a fairy tale, right? Too good to be true, almost. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden, if you will. It's so perfect, so wonderful, and you think to yourself, is it really all that wonderful? Well, that's what the story wants us to catch on to, right? To get that glimmer of how this was like perfection. It was so good there. And all through that story, right, when you read it from the chapter, it's, and the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord's with him, and Potiphar could see that the Lord was with him, and everything he did was successful because the Lord was with him. The Lord was with him. The Lord was with him. And it's an amazing refrain. Because there he is, how far away from his own father's house? How far away from his family? He's in this strange culture, in this strange house. Somehow, he's doing well, he's living well, he's matured, clearly. I don't know how aware he was of God. None of us know. Looking back, of course, the writer picks all of that up. But so everything is going so good, and there you have this Joseph who's doing so well that everything in Potiphar's household has been entrusted to his care. He is clearly like the image of God. Perfection. You can trust this man. He's taking care of things, right? For his master, which is the image of God piece. That's how it starts. Only food is all the thing that Potiphar pays attention to. He doesn't worry about another thing. Okay? And if the story would end right there, you'd say, okay, that's the fairy tale happy ending story. And this is where you hear the guy in the commercial saying, but wait, there's more. Right? Just like we had. Joseph, we're told, was well-built and handsome. You can picture that somehow. I'm not sure what that looks like to you, but just imagine well-built and handsome, whatever that is. And Potiphar's wife noticed, right? Well, we're back in the Garden of Eden again, folks. Right? We're back in the Garden of Eden because this is a story of temptation. She saw something that was pleasing to her eye and she wanted to partake of it. That sound familiar, right? And so she went after it. She was okay with partaking. But Joseph, unlike the first Adam, Joseph resists. And he says, my master has given me everything, it's all entrusted to my care. He hasn't held a single thing back from me. He has given me the fruit of all the trees in the garden. But I'm not to partake of this one. Right? You are his wife. Day after day, right? It's relentless. The pressure is there, relentless. It's just wearing somebody down until that day when she grabs his cloak. She has opportunity. And he runs the other way. Good for him. So here's the interesting piece, which had never occurred to me till just this week with thinking about all this. There she is, holding the cloak, the coat, missing the body. The body's not there, it's just the coat. And what does she have to do? She doesn't have to concoct a story. It could drop it and the story could end right there. But she dreams up this big story and she says, right? to explain the missing body. There's no such thing as a he said in this story, because when you're a slave, you don't have a voice. Like a sheep before his slaughter is dumb, the Bible says. So he opened not his mouth. This is a story in which Joseph quietly has to endure the anger of Potiphar, which is unjust, all the rest of it. It's really surprising that he didn't get killed on the spot, but he gets thrown in prison, and makes me wonder, did Potiphar have a little twinge of maybe there was something to his side of the story, if there was his side of the story? But the thing is, here's Joseph in prison. He's already been betrayed and sent off by his brothers. Now he's again suffering injustice. The first time, well, there might have been some justice in the brothers being upset with him. And it's not his fault that they sold him, but he may have had some regrets about how he conducted himself. This time, totally unjust, totally unfair, right? Here's Joseph, and he has worked for Potiphar with such integrity, and he has done his best to be this mature, responsible servant. And look where he ends up. I wonder what he was thinking when he got thrown into prison. And I wonder now again, did he have regrets? Maybe he should have not run away or whatever. Was he there just in the pouting mode? Poor me. Was he just angry? Was he resigned to his fate, whatever that might be? Again, in a much shorter fashion, we are told that while he was in prison, very much like when he was in Potiphar's house before, he was noticed for his character, for his capableness, for his trustworthiness. He's recognized as somebody with integrity, and before you know it, the prison warden says, "You know what, Joseph, you're the man that I'm going to put in charge of things here." Because he recognized and respected this Joseph. He was trustworthy. And again in that little passage, it says, "And the Lord was with him." So that's the story. And as you can see, within the story, we get connections to the Garden of Eden. We think back, there's echoes back to that, right? There are also, it's kind of like not echoes, I guess, but some kind of reverberations that move ahead, and you start thinking about the story of Jesus and about what's going on there. And when you hear those echoes in the story, and that's one of the things for me that is one of the most fun things about reading Scripture, is hearing more and more the echoes, the way the stories link with each other. And what happens is the more you see the interconnections, the more you see how your life ties in to those connections. Now, your story is tied into this bigger one. And so that's really the thing for us, is to say, okay, you get a story like this. How are the ways in which this story ties in to the story of my life? And how does the way Joseph's story tie into the bigger story the Bible tells, the story of Jesus and ultimate redemption, God being with us even in the middle of all the darkness and all the hurt and whatever else it is? How does that help us deal with our circumstances? There's a fair question to think about in terms of this story about integrity, about Joseph. Just the way he conducted himself, he's living in a strange place. He's all alone. But clearly he lives in a way that there's some integrity to him. He's a man of character, a man of God, if you will. That's one piece. He's powerless, and yet he's recognized. Something else, and I think the much bigger piece in this story is There are a couple of points along the way, right? When he gets sold to the caravan on his way to Egypt, and then again when he gets thrown into prison. These are two times where Joseph suffers just some real indignity. And it's unfair. And it's the kind of thing where life sometimes deals us and treats us in ways that are hurtful and painful, and sometimes they're unwarranted. And we don't always like it. Sometimes, we suffer consequences because of our own misbehavior, or we make bad choices, whatever. But a lot of times things happen, and unfairness is part of what we experience. And the question always is then, so where's God? Why is this happening? We ask those kinds of questions. We have anxieties and fears in those moments. We're living in unknown places sometimes. This story says, whatever you do, remember this really, really good news. In Joseph's case, God was with him. God was with him in that place, in his life, where he was. He was alone, from a human point of view. He was a long ways away from his family, his land, his place, all that stuff. But where he was not away from God, because God was not away from him. There's a lesson there for us. Good news for Joseph, good news for us. Circumstances. Sometimes they're personal. Sometimes we have hard circumstances in terms of our work. Sometimes it's just life in these times where politics is painful. And you wonder sometimes what's going on and where's God in all of it. We're part of a big story too. Joseph was as well. One of the things that I can't go into this morning, but is to tell you that the story of Joseph, all 10 chapters of it, they're actually part of the Jacob story. And that's a whole other thing. But Joseph's story was part of the Jacob story, and of course Jacob's story is part of the story of, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the promises of God, and away we go until we get to Jesus, and ultimately we get to the new earth, where God is with us. But the big story is the story that we have. Joseph didn't know how it was going to end. We're reading about it now, and we've heard it before. We kind of know where this is going. Nice for us. Where was Joseph? He didn't have a clue, right? And so the question that we need wrestle with is, we have actually the story that tells us how it's going to end. We've read the last page already, right? And we're here somewhere in the middle. The big key events have happened. Jesus has died and risen and ascended, and the Spirit's been poured out and so on. That's the big story within which the stories of our lives are framed, anchored, and find meaning. The question that all of us need wrestle with every single day is, how deeply do I trust that story? There's no data. There's no empirical proof for stuff. The Bible tells us this great story. We believe it's a story inspired by the Holy Spirit. We believe God is with us, right where we are. Life is all by itself and fully, life is spiritual, because God is with us. And the story of our lives, of our work and our play, our buying and our selling, all of it is part of how we are demonstrating that we trust the story the Bible tells, or not. It's a hard one. Because a lot of times what you see and hear and feel leave you thinking, where is the invisible God? And this story says, He's with you. He's with me. You have to trust that story and the truth of it, and then live in ways that honor it. And I think that's the heart of the Joseph story.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this recording. Just a reminder that you can find our website at rivercommunity.ca. There you can find our events calendar with information about upcoming messages and gatherings, or sign up for currents. Feel free to send us a message on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Our services start 10 o'clock Sunday mornings, and you are welcome to come early for coffee, tea, and bagels. Have a great week. Bye-bye.